What's up? Hello, where is everybody?
I'm right here.
It's cold? Everyone's staying home? Okay, so quickly, I got a few announcements for you. So we did the Project Food Packs this past couple of weeks, right? Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
We
remember.
Cool. So here's the cool thing. We got to pack all 24 food packs. With the extras, I kind of sorted them out, went through everything, and filled out the rest of those packs. So those are going to go to families across the nation. I'm out of breath because I ran up here. So those are going to go to families across the nation. They're going to be sent to churches, and then those pastors and those people in those churches are going to be able to pass those out to those families. So not only do they get like a meal and some snacks and some cookies and stuff, they also get to get plugged in with the local church around them and then get to be told about Jesus, right? And that's the ultimate goal out of all of this. So another announcement, Service Saturday is this next Saturday. So your leaders, your Wednesday night leaders are going to have a link for you where y'all can decide when and what time you're going to serve together, if that's y'all's plan. And if not, you can go to the Northeast homepage on link and you can sign up there with your family. But yeah, that'll be a good time. Please come out to that. Like that's going to be a really cool experience and a way to kind of serve and touch the community and show them, the love of Christ. And so last thing, we are starting a new series today. It is called Not by Chance.
Woo! Yeah.
Okay. It's called Not by Chance. And so JP's going to kick us off this week, and I'm going to say the kind of details of that for him later. So, let's play a game. Can everyone stand up? What? So this game is called Christian Chicken Trivia. The Lord's Chicken. How well do you know your Chicky F? Okay. So we're gonna have a question. If you think it's A, hold up a 1. If you think it's B, 2, C, 3, D, 4. And if you get it right, stay standing. If you get it wrong, sit down. There will be a really cool prize. Okay? So this is all about Chick-fil-A. C. Okay. So if you guys see, stay standing. That was a big one. That was a tough one. Okay. Next question. Who founded Chick-fil-A? Was it Ben Groot? S. Truett Cathy? Mel Clark? John Howard Swain? What do you think? 1, 2, 3, 4. You look pretty confident. Do you know? Yeah? No? Hold him high. What is it? That's true. Wow! Dropping like flies. Okay. Next question. Before it was known as Chick-fil-A, what was the name of Cathy's restaurant? Was it the Dwarf Grill, Cathy's Family Diner, the Chicken Grill, Captain Flux, Chicken Grill? 1, 2, 3, or 4. You wanna hold them high? So I can see. Make sure you're not cheating. Hunter? Make sure you're not cheating. Okay, what do you think? The Dwarf Grill! If you get it wrong, please sit down. If you are still standing, that's anybody. You can come to the front. Want to come to the front? No way y'all guessed the Dwarf Grill. I don't believe it. Alright. So this. It is
Cake Grill.
What?
Cake.
It is only for the Chick-fil-A gift card if you win. Where was the original Chick-fil-A store built? Was it Duluth, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Vidalia, Georgia, or Hickville? 1, 2, 3, or 4. What do you think? Pick 2. 2 and 4. What is it? Okay. Sorry. So, Emily, you want to give him a applause for all this now? So, we could have have the worship team come up and kind of get ready.
Yeah! Give it up for our tech crew this morning. Yeah! Hey, so before we move on, there was a reason we played a Chick-fil-A game today. Today's Michaela's birthday. Michaela, come on down in front. Come on. So in case you don't know, Michaela loves Chick-fil-A. What she doesn't love is me calling her out and embarrassing her in front of everybody. So that's exactly what we're going to do today because I have the microphone and I'm the youth pastor, so I get to do that. But before we sing, a couple of things. First of all, besides Chick-fil-A, Michaela also loves chocolate glazed donuts, like not the kind that have chocolate icing, but the chocolate cake. Get up here. Like the chocolate cake donut with the glaze on it. So we got one of those for her this morning, but we also got donuts for you guys to celebrate Michaela's birthday. So yeah. Here's the deal. We wanted to celebrate that with you guys. So on your way out after groups this morning, you can grab a donut as you guys leave. Here's the thing. Here's the reason I want to celebrate Michaela today. One, because she's my wife and I love her, and I get to do that. But two, like Michaela does a ton for our student ministry behind the scenes. Like for example, when I need to be doing something late at night or middle school mayhem or whatever, Michaela's the one who takes care of both the wild children that live in our house. And so things like that Michaela does for you guys all the time. So I wanted to make sure we pause and recognize the role that she plays. Yeah, JP is the student pastor, but Michaela has a huge role in that as well. I'm going to not light your hair on fire. Can I do that? Anyway, so we wanted to celebrate her this morning. So if we could, let's sing happy birthday as loud as we can. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Michaela. Happy birthday to you. So yeah, happy birthday, Michaela. We'll have a donut here in a minute. Will you guys pray with us as we get started this morning? God, we're so grateful for an opportunity to be here to worship you this morning. And God, as we dive into worship now and sing together, God, we pray that our hearts will be focused on you and nothing else. God, we love you, and we're thankful for the word you're going to bring us this morning. Amen.
Generation To speak 100 billion galaxies are born in the vapor of your breath. The planets form. The stars were made to worship so alive. I can see your heart in everything you made.
worship team this morning. Well, how's everybody? You guys good? Yeah. Enjoying this cool weather? Nope. Oh man. When it gets cold like this, I get excited. Like, you know how maybe your dog does this. Our dog, when it gets cold like this, goes outside and just starts sprinting around the backyard, and then comes in like, did you know it's cold outside? I kind of act that way. Like, I'll be honest. All right, so we're kicking off a new series today. In case you didn't see by the graphic, it's a little bit game related. You guys into games? You guys like card games? Yeah. You guys like strategy games or card games? Like at my house, we play a lot of Uno. We play a lot of Yahtzee, games that are really simple. But then there are games like Secret Hitler, which I know there are a lot of fans of that in here. There are games like Black Orchestra and I don't know, Trails to Kana. Is that what it's called? Trails to Kana. It's a game we've been playing a lot lately. So I'm a big game fan. We love playing games, right? Did anybody in here would say like, I like playing poker? Like your parents are in the room, so you can admit that maybe? Yeah. If you're like me, you grew up playing like poker or blackjack, but you're betting like Chick-fil-A sauces or Jolly Ranchers or something like that, right? Like it's not really real. What about like magic card tricks? Does anybody in here know any good magic tricks? Several of you do. Several of you know. So here's the deal. I was like, I'm just going to get up here this morning and see if somebody knows a card trick, and I'm going to let them do it. So, Jake, I'm going to let you come do a card trick. You want to come do a card trick? Give it up for Jake, Mom. Jake's a senior, and we let seniors do whatever they want. So, I'm just kidding. That's not true at all. So, everybody, this is Jake.
Hi, Jake.
Jake's awesome. So Jake's going to show us a card trick. There's nothing weird about this deck or whatever. I just pulled it out of the box. It's brand new. Jake, what do you got?
Totally normal deck of cards. See that, guys?
Totally normal.
Totally normal. 16 cards. So, I'm going to lay these out.
Okay.
And you're going to tell me what's the pile.
Okay. Does anybody know this trick? Anybody else know this trick before? Some people do. Magic. Alright, so I pick any card on the table.
And we'll just pick a pile that it's in.
Pick a pile that it's in. I'm going to pick this pile. The far left. Your far right. My far left. Do you guys think Jake knows what he's doing?
No.
We'll see. This is a risky thing. Like, I always have respect for magicians because there's always a plan, but there's so many ways that can go wrong. Hope that's not making you nervous, but it could go wrong. Okay. Yeah, what do you want now? Which pile is it? This one. Anybody, like, when you were little, you got, like, a magic kit for Christmas or something? Like, in your room trying to learn these tricks? Yes. All right, here we go. Now he's dealing them face down, which is different.
Alright, tell it. Pick 2 piles.
Pick 2 piles. I'll pick this one and this one.
So I pick 1 pile.
Pick this one. Whoa. That would be really impressive if that was the truth. Yeah.
Alright, now.
Pick this one and this one. I'll pick this one. 10 of clubs was my card. Jake Hogue, everybody. Give it up for I told Jake earlier, he said he knew a card trick, and I said, cool, I may use you this morning. Like, I may pull you up on stage. She goes, what if I get it wrong? I said, nobody else knows what card I picked, so I'll just lie. But it was the 10 of clubs. Like, Jake actually did it, so congratulations. Give that to Jake. So, let's do one more card trick. I have a card trick. You guys want to do one more card trick with me? Yeah. I need a volunteer, though. I need somebody to help me out. Yeah, let's go, Mason. She's easily accessible. It's good. All right, here we go. Pick a card, any card. That's how all good magic tricks go. So, I'm going to let you show them. I'm going to look this way. So I don't know the card. Make sure everybody sees it, show it all the way around the room. Everybody got it? Okay, hide your card, don't let me see it. Okay? Now you can put it back in the deck anywhere you want.
I know this trick.
Anywhere you want. You know this trick?
Be quiet.
That's a question. So I'm going to shuffle the deck around a little bit. I'm going to let you shuffle the deck around a little bit. That's okay, however you want to mix them up. Yep, that's fine. Cut the deck. It's good. Okay, now I need another volunteer really quick. Yeah, come here real quick. Yep. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this card deck and I'm going to cut it in half. Kind of like Jake did in his trick. I'm going to let you pick a deck to eliminate. So you're about to eliminate half the cards. Okay? You're about to eliminate half of them. So which one do you want to eliminate? If you pick the one that has her card in it, then you mess up my trick because then her card's not in the deck that we're using anymore. A lot of pressure, that's right. Okay, so she's eliminating this one, which means these are the cards that are left. Okay? So these are the cards that are left. Mason, I'm going to have you pick your card again. So pull that card from the top deck. Is that your card? No, it's not your card, right? I knew that that was your card. Show them that card. Right? That's not her card, right? So how crazy would it be if your card wasn't on the table at all anymore and it was just gone? That would be weird, right? Okay, so third row on this side on the end, there's a card taped under your chair. Can you pull that card out? Yeah.
No.
It's taped under that chair.
No way. No.
You feel it? You can flip that over if you need to. She said this is about to be really weird. Nothing there? It's there, I'm pretty sure. Oh, you know what? You know what? It's not in that chair. It's in Berkeley's chair. It's next to your chair. All right, Berkeley, pull that card out. Is that Mason's card? No, it's not. That's okay, because you know what? That's part of the trick.
Got him!
No, for real, your card though is taped under Isaac's chair. Isaac, yeah. Isaiah, sorry. Isaac. I said Isaac. That's under Isaiah's card right here. Left, third row. Is that Mason's card? That's not Mason's card? You guys can sit down now.
Got him!
So we're just going to pretend that didn't happen. What was your card? Two of diamonds was her card! I did it! For a second there, some of you were like, okay, I know JP's like a pastor and he's connected with God and everything, but if that card's under that chair, I'm going to walk out of this room because that's freaky. Right? That's how I get in magic shows. Here's the deal. I don't know how to do that card trick. That's not even a card trick. Somebody said, I know this trick. Like, no, you don't, because I just made it up as I went up here. So that's not a real thing. Here's the thing about card tricks, right? There has to be a plan. There's something that's happening underneath that, right? When Jake's dealing out this deck on the table, and he's asking me which row my card is in, there's a plan. There's a way that the trick operates, right? There's a process to that. And so he's eliminating cards, and he's moving cards around, and he's getting to the card that I picked. Not because he can read my mind, but because of the way he's moving the cards around, right? There's a plan in that. Does that make sense? Same thing when you're playing cards, right? If you're playing any card game that requires you to bluff or try to keep track of the cards, or even if you're playing matching, right, with your 4-year-old on the table, like you can remember, oh yeah, he flipped over that one and it was a 2, and so now that I'm flipping over a 2, I remember that there was a 2 there, right? There's a plan in picking those cards even, right? Anybody seen the new James Bond movie yet?
No.
It was awesome!
I haven't seen it yet. Wow, that was brutal. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm really excited to. I like James Bond. The other night, I made a horrible decision and stayed up till 3 a.m. watching Casino Royale, which I've already watched. Like, I already knew it was going to happen, but it's James Bond, and he's driving a cool car, and he's shooting people. Like, I got to watch it. So I watched it, right? And in that movie, James Bond talks about this, right? He's trying to beat this terrorist and try to stop them from getting $150 million. And he's like, it's not chance, right? When you're playing, you never play the hand in front of you, you play the man across the table, right? It's not just the hand that you're dealt. Even the great Kenny Rogers knows that there's more to it than just the draw, right? You gotta know when to
Hold him.
and you gotta know when to
Hold him.
yeah, you gotta know when to hold them and know when to fold them, right? There's skill in that, there's a plan in that, there's something going on besides just the cards that get dealt to you, right? You guys tracking with me on that? Jake's magic trick had a plan. Mine had no plan. I randomly take 2 cards under 2 chairs and then brought a random volunteer up here and made something up as I went. And it was really, really unimpressive because I didn't reveal her card, right? I didn't find the card that she had picked. There was no plan in that. So in this series, we want to tie this idea that, man, there has to be a plan. There's something more than just the cards that get dealt, right? It's more than just the luck of the draw, right? People say, well, it's just the luck of the draw that I am where I am or whatever. Like, it's just by chance. When it comes to God and our relationship with Him, the plan that He has for the world, it's not just by chance. There's more to that. He's not making it up as He goes and just responding in those moments. God has a plan. So that's what we're going to talk about in the series. We've talked already this year about, right, changing our approach to fear, like switching from I fear to He loves and a couple of other things in that. But sometimes life still seems scary, right? It still seems like we have all this opportunity to be anxious or have fear. We just finished a series on prayer, and man, loved that prayer experience with you guys last week, by the way, and the opportunity to pray for a bunch of different things. But sometimes we pray and it's like, man, God's not answering me. I'm still waiting for Him to respond, right? And so what do we do with that? What do we do with the fact that it doesn't seem like there's a plan here? It just seems like it's by chance that these things are happening. So that's what we want to look at. It's not the luck of the draw. And if we understand that, then knowing that God has a plan that's working allows us to align better with that, allows us to understand that better, and allows us to trust that more. So over the next 5 weeks, we are going to look at some Old Testament stories, some characters and some Bible stories that you've probably heard before. But specifically, we want to look at God's plan and how it runs through that. So today we're going to start with Esther. So if you would open in your Bibles to the book of Esther, if you have a physical Bible, if you open up to the middle, usually you'll hit Psalms or Proverbs. Esther's just a couple books before that. So if you hit Psalms, Job is in between there, and then Esther is right before that. So we're going to be in Esther this morning. Esther is 10 chapters long. Can you guys turn the gain down just a little bit so it's not squeaking and killing everybody's ears? That'd be great. So Esther is 10 chapters long, and here's the thing. We're going to cover the whole thing this morning. And so we are going to kind of speed through this together, slowing down, and I'll kind of fill you in on the parts that we don't actually read out loud together. But this whole story is really cool. It's not just a passage of it. This whole story is really, really cool. And so Esther, in this story, just to give you a little bit of context, the Jews, God's chosen people, right, have been exiled. So they had this land, they had this space that God had given them, and then the Babylonians came in and they conquered them, and they get spread out everywhere. Some of them are sold as slaves and stuff like that. And so Esther is a Jew that has been exiled. And so she now ends up in a different place, and the Persians since then have come to power. And so the Jews are kind of scattered out in a bunch of different places. Many of them went back to God's place for them, but some of them didn't. Some of them just got comfortable being in this new place, and so they stayed where they were. And so Jews were kind of spread out, and some people were kind of suspicious of them because they knew that there's this history of this power that they had with God behind them. And so we kind of pick it up there in the book of Esther. And so there's this guy, this king. Does anybody know Esther's king, like her husband? What's his name? You guys know? Xerxes, right? So one thing I want to point out really quick, if you read in your Bible, Esther starts like this. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, or something like that, this guy is Xerxes. So a lot of times in the Bible, people have different names. So this is one name, Xerxes is another name, there's Greek, there's Persian name, like all this stuff. And so Xerxes is who we're talking about this morning. So this king Xerxes, anytime you see Ahasuerus, that is King Xerxes, just so we're clear on like this is the same person we're talking about. So as we start the book of Esther, this king, King Xerxes, had spent 180 days like in this military planning summit. Like he brought all of his leaders together, and for 180 days they're like, here's how we're going to go conquer the world. We've already beat Babylon. Here's what we're going to do next, right? And so at the end of that, he wants to recognize all of his leaders and like, okay, we have this plan moving forward. And so they throw a 7-day party. I don't know if you've been to a good party before, but a 7-day party, like for 7 days straight. And the beginning of Esther talks about just how beautiful it is and all of that stuff. So it's this 7-day party. And so we're going to pick it up in verse 10 of chapter 1. It says, on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, which means he was drunk, he had a little bit too much, he commanded all of these guys, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Xerxes, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown. So currently, Queen Vashti is the king's wife. She is the queen. Right? So he commands her to come before him with her royal crown, in order to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. Right? So the king gives this order. He wants to show off his beautiful queen. And so he says, I want you to come out here. He sends this message to her, and she's like, no, I ain't doing that. No. And I don't know why. Like she's like, you're drunk or whatever. I don't know. She doesn't come before him, right? Big deal, right? Because you don't say no to the king. Anything the king says goes. And so the fact that she said no was a huge deal, and it warranted death for her, right? Not only that, but some of the king's council, they were like, hey, this isn't just a big deal that she defiled you and said no to something you asked, but she has set an example now for all the women around that they can say no to their husbands, and we ain't for that, right? So they're like, all these women are going to get mad and start telling their husbands no when they ask them to do something. That's not the way it should be. We have to deal with this. Kind of crazy, but that's where we're at, right? And so as a result, Queen Vashti is banished. She can never see the king again. She's kicked out. She's not the queen anymore. Her time in the palace is over. And it's amazing that she wasn't executed on the spot, right? But she's out. And so what has to happen, right? He has to find a new queen. And so King Xerxes goes on the search for a new queen. And that's where we find Esther. So we're going to pick it up in chapter 2 now. So skip ahead a little bit. Chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. Say this. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jared, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, again, 2 different names. This is like her Jewish name, or her Hebrew name, and now the name she goes by in this new town, right, which is Esther, the daughter of his uncle. For she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. When her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Hegai, Esther was also taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. All right, so Esther now has this opportunity, but before we talk about her opportunity to become queen, right, I want to read through a couple of the things that we just read. I want to review a couple of these things. So one, again, recognize that they got kicked out of their hometown, right? They were exiled away from the place that God had put them in, right? And then it says that Esther's parents have died. She's an orphan. She doesn't have a mom or dad. So it's got Mordecai, who's her cousin, and I don't know the age difference there or whatever, but Mordecai is her first cousin, and he basically adopts Esther as his own daughter. And so he's going to take her in, he's going to take her under her wing and protect her and guide her, right? And they're Jews living in this foreign country. And so all of a sudden this opportunity comes up where they're looking for a queen, and it says that Esther's gorgeous, right? Like there are very few women that are described in the Bible the way that Esther is described, which means she is really, really beautiful. Like God has designed her with a lot of physical features that were attractive, right? And so she now has this opportunity in this search for a queen to step into that, right? So orphan, adopted by her cousin, living outside of her original hometown, and now there's this opportunity to become queen. And she's beautiful, so she finds favor in this process, right? So let's skip down to verse 21. Because in this process, as Esther's like basically trying out to become the queen, something else crazy happens that we need to make sure that we read. So if we skip down to verse 21, Mordecai, her cousin, who has kind of adopted her, is keeping track of Esther and what's going on. So he's hanging around the palace quite a bit. So starting in 21, it says, in those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on the king. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, so she has become queen at this point. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged at the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. So as Esther is becoming queen, she gets this role. Mordecai's staying near because this is his daughter, basically, and he loves her. He hears this plot to kill the king. Like, he just happens to be there, and he overhears that these two guys on the inside are mad at the king, and they're going to kill him. And so he tells Esther. Esther tells the king. They investigate it. They catch these guys. It was true. They were going to kill him. So Mordecai saves the king's life, right? And Esther has a role in that too, because she delivers this message. And so it says that they wrote that down in this book. He saves the king, and it's recorded in the nation's history, basically. And so then after this, we're introduced to this guy named Haman. We all hiss when we hear about Haman. Haman's the bad guy in the story, right? So Haman is this guy who's been given a lot of power. Basically, he's second in charge, right? And so Haman is all about that, and he likes that, and he kind of walks around with his head up. But here's the deal. Mordecai won't bow to Haman. And the Bible doesn't say why Mordecai won't bow. We don't know if it's just because he doesn't like him, or if he thought he should get a promotion, or what. Maybe it's because he's a Jew and Haman's not. Whatever it is, Mordecai's like, hey, I ain't bowing down to this guy, right? And Haman can't stand it because he's been given this power and he thinks that he should be able to exercise that. So let's jump to chapter 3, verses 5 to 6, because this sets up something huge. Starting verse 5, it says, and when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. So Haman's not only mad at Mordecai, he's like, Mordecai is a Jew and all of his people are like that, right? And so I don't know if he was out to get the Jews or if he just hated Mordecai so much, he's like, I'm going to wipe out all of his people even, right? So he begins to plot to kill all of the Jews, all of God's people, under the power of the king. So he goes to the king. He even offers the king this large sum of money and says, if you'll let me execute them all, I'll even pay to your treasury all of this money. And Haman gets permission to do this. So Haman goes out and he sends these letters out to all of the different districts in the king's rule. And he says, on this month, on this day, all of the Jews can be killed. And so they set up this date, they put it on their calendar. Sweet, on Friday we're killing the Jews, let's circle that, right? Crazy deal. But it's this whole thing. And so the Jews are terrified. They're like, man, they are about to wipe us out. And especially Mordecai, right? Because he knows that this could be the end of his people. And so he's wearing sackcloth, right, and ashes, which is a sign of mourning in Bible times. And Esther hears this, and she's trying to comfort Mordecai, and she's like, hey, here are some fine robes from the palace. Put these on. And Mordecai's like, no, I can't. Our people are about to be killed. And so she can't console him, right? And so Mordecai tells Esther, hey, you need to go to the king and stop this, right? You are in a position, you go to the king and stop this thing that's going to happen to us. So let's skip ahead to chapter 4. We'll pick it up in verse 10. Like I said, we're kind of speeding through this morning, so try to keep up. Here we go. Chapter 4, verse 10. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's province know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come to the king in these 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther said, and Mordecai said to them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther told him to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a great fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days or nights. I and my young woman will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered. So Esther's like, look, Mordecai, I can't go to the king because there's this rule. If you go to the king without being called, you die. You just get killed, right? She's like, for 30 days he hasn't called me to his presence. And so if I just go up with this plea to stop this thing, I'm going to die, right? Unless the king holds out his scepter and saves me, I'm going to die. And Mordecai's response is basically, listen, like, God will save the Jews at some point potentially, but you're going to die anyway because they're going to find out you're a Jew. See, to this point, Mordecai had told Esther, don't tell anybody that you're a Jew. And so it wasn't known that Esther was a Jew. She was kind of keeping that undercover, and Mordecai was too about her, right? And so Esther is now being asked to go into the king's presence, which is against the law, reveal that she's an outsider, that she's this Jew, and beg for all of the Jews to survive. And Mordecai says, listen, if you don't do that, you're going to die anyway, because they're going to find out you're a Jew, and they're going to kill you, and they're going to kill me, they're going to kill everybody you know. And so maybe God has put you here for such a time as this, right? So in verse 14, this is the verse that people look to when they study the book of Esther. They say, this is kind of the crux of the book. This is the point that matters the most. This is the thing that we focus on, is God's provision and his perfect timing. He says, maybe God's plan is for you to be here in this moment, right now, to do this, right? And so Esther finally agrees. She asks him and all the people around her to fast so that she can kind of prepare for this. So she eventually goes before the king. King holds out his scepter, doesn't kill her, spares her life, right? And she says, and the king says, you can have anything you want, up to half the kingdom. The king loves Esther, so he says, you can have half the kingdom if you want it. What are you coming to ask for? And she says, hey, I just want to invite you and Haman to dinner. Like, I'm going to throw this feast. Will you come to dinner? And so he says, sure. So they go to dinner together, right? And so they're sitting at dinner, and then they're enjoying their time together, good food and wine and all that stuff. And the king says to Esther, what do you want? Again, up to half the kingdom, I'll give you that. And Esther says, come back to another feast tomorrow night. Right? Like, I want to do this again with you and Haman tomorrow night, and at that point, I'll tell you what my request is. So the king agrees, Haman agrees. In the meantime, Haman goes home, and he's still furious at Mordecai. Like, he still wants to kill him. He's talking to his family, and they say, hey, why don't you build some new gallows at our house that are 75 feet high so we can make a statement of this thing, and you can kill Mordecai tomorrow by hanging him on those gallows. Right, so pay attention to the timeline of this. Esther goes before the king. They have dinner together. She says, tomorrow I'm going to tell you my request. And in between then, Mordecai is about to be hanged. Because Haman builds these gallows. He says, tomorrow I'm hanging the guy. Like, I'm done with this, right? So we pick it up in chapter 6, verse 1. This is crazy. Check this out. Chapter 6, verse 1. On that night, the king could not sleep. And he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the chronicles that were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold and who had sought to lay hands on the king. And the king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young men who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. And the king said, who is on the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's young men told him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? So let's pause real quick. The king doesn't know that Haman's about to kill Mordecai. He doesn't know that this is going on. And Haman doesn't know that the king is talking about Mordecai. And so the king says, how should I honor somebody that I favor? Haman thinks he's talking about him, right? There's this huge mix-up in Haman's mind, right? And so Haman is responding thinking that whatever he says is what's going to happen to him, right? And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes of the horse be handed over to the king's most noble official. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, this is great, hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned. So Haman took the robes and the horse, and he dressed Mordecai, and led him through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Literally, Haman has to parade Mordecai around the city, like so everybody can cheer for him, right? Like he's dressed him in the king's clothes, he's riding the king's horse, and Haman's holding this thing like, This is what's going to be done if you delight the king. Like, he's literally parading him around the city. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm Haman, like, I am furious at this point, right? Like, this has gone the complete opposite way. This guy that I was about to kill, I'm now having to honor. Like, what in the world, right? And what are the odds that the night before Mordecai gets hung on these gallows, the king just happens to not be able to sleep, so he's like, hey, pull out our history and read that. And the king discovers that they missed this opportunity to honor Mordecai. And so Mordecai, at least for now, his life is saved. And so he has to parade him around. After that's done, he goes back to his family, and he is venting, right? And they're like, hey, you got to take care of this guy, or you're going to fall before him, right? And so then we pick it back up in chapter 7. As he's talking about this with his family, the eunuchs from the king come and they say, hey, it's time for that second feast with Esther. So they come to pick him up, basically, and they take him to the second feast. So chapter 7. So the king and Haman went in to feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day, as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said again to Esther, what is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared to the loss of the king. Then King Xerxes said to Queen Esther, who is he, and where is he, who has dared to do this? And Esther said, a foe and an enemy, this wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. Can you imagine this? You're the guilty one, and you're at this party of 3, and Esther starts like making this request. And as Esther's explaining this, right, Haman's like, oh. Like, he's figuring out what's about to happen. And then Esther points him out and like just points her finger at him and says it's him. He's the one. And so the king is furious, right? Because he had no idea what was going on and what Haman was up to. And so the king is so mad. It actually says right after this that the king has to like get up and go take a break to compose himself. So like he gets up and leaves the room. While he's gone, Haman starts begging Esther for his life because he recognizes like he's about to get killed for this. And so he bows down at like this couch that Esther's on, and he's asking her like, please, please help me. The king walks back in and was so mad at him, he thinks that Haman is trying to rape Esther now. Like, this is the picture in his head. Like, he is so furious with Haman that he comes back in, sees Haman within a foot of the queen, and says, now you're going to come at her in my house? Are you kidding me? And so they cover his face, which was a sign of a man condemned or something. And he's trying to figure out, what do we do with this? And somebody tells him, oh, king, he just built these gallows to kill Mordecai. And the king's like, that sounds great. And so they take Haman to his house, to his own house, these gallows that he built to hang Mordecai on, and they kill him. They hang him right there. Done. He's finished. Right? What a crazy story. Like, it's insane, right? After this, by the way, so Haman dies. Esther and Mordecai are honored. They're actually given Haman's house, and the Jews are saved. Mordecai is put in this position in the palace. Esther lives on as the queen. What a crazy story. Like, I don't know about you, but if this is me, and I go to a movie and see this played out, this is one of those movies where I walk out and I'm like, nah, that's just too much, right? That's just too unrealistic. Like, there's no way that the king just happened to not be able to sleep and happens to read the history books the night before he's going to get hanged. There's no way. But here's the deal. There is a way. Because it's God, right? God has a plan. It's not by chance that these things happen. There's something going on underneath that. So when we point back to verse 14 of chapter 4, when Mordecai says, maybe you've been placed in the palace for such a time as this, he's saying like, man, God has a plan, and God is working, and God is moving behind all of these circumstances, behind all of these things that have happened, right? And so maybe God has placed you there for this. Let's think about, I know we read a lot, and there's 10 chapters, right? So let's go back and talk about some of this again. Vashti ignores the king, and so there's a vacancy for queen, right? Because she gets kicked out. After being exiled and losing her parents, Esther's adopted by her cousin who guides her through this whole process, and she becomes queen. Mordecai overhears a conversation to save the king's life. Esther, a Jew, finds favor with the king when the enemy wants to destroy her people. And the king happens to remember Mordecai the night before he kills him. And then the bad guy gets killed on the very gallows that he built for Mordecai. Like, there's a lot of crazy pieces in there that don't make any sense unless God is present. So here's the first thing I want you to walk away with this morning. God's timing is perfect, right? God's timing is always perfect. And so all of these things, like, they're not just circumstances. It's not a coincidence that happened, right? It's all perfect. When we are praying for something and it seems like God's not answering, like, why hasn't he done this yet? We can trust in that moment that his timing is perfect. When something comes up that scares us and we're like, hey, we did that series about not fearing, but why are there still scary things? Like, why is this still happening? We can understand that God's plan is perfect. His timing is perfect in that, just like it was in the story of Esther. Right? When we don't understand why God is doing something, we have reason to be patient in those moments because his timing is perfect. Here's the thing that I want you guys to understand. This is like a big theological thing that I'm going to give you like a quick snapshot of. God holds time. Okay, let's think about this for a second. What I mean by that is time exists within God, right? He created it. He invented it. It is his. It's his thing. So let's look at it this way. We're going to put this line on the screen that represents time, right? So eternity that way, eternity that way. Like, and we could make the screen infinitely big, right? And the line would keep going. But here's the deal. If this represents time, in this moment right here, like, you couldn't even put a dot on the screen that would represent how little this little moment is, right? Because eternity is huge. That line still exists within the confines of the screen, right? If you drew a line on a paper, the paper is God, line is time. That line exists within God. He holds all of it. Does that make sense? If we're representing eternity up here, the line is still contained within the screen, which is God. He holds everything. So if God holds all of time, if he sees the future and the past and the present all together at the same time, because he holds all of it at the same time, it's his to own, then his timing is perfect in all of that because he sees what's coming. And so for us, when we have a moment where we're like, God's slow to answer this prayer, I wish he would hurry up, he's not responding. Right? God sees a bigger plan that's going on. It's not by chance that these things are happening. God's using that for something else that's coming. God doesn't ever show up late. He shows up intentionally. Right? So we have this opportunity within that to stay humble and to understand that God is doing something. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." I don't know about you. I hate waiting. I hate that idea of like, just be still, God's going to do it, right? I want to know when he's going to do it. I want to know what the plan is. I want to know how he's going to do it. All of this stuff. But his timing is perfect and not mine. So in a moment where I'm like, God, this is the time to act. I can't see the whole line that God can see. I don't understand that because I don't hold time. He does. And so I have to trust in that moment that his timing is perfect. And one of the things that we struggle to do, right, is we try to take that into our own hands. A few weeks ago, Kyle taught about Hagar. Right? Abraham and Sarah are supposed to have this baby. They're tired of waiting, and so they have a baby by their slave, Hagar. Like they tried to speed things up on their own timing. That wasn't God's plan. That wasn't his timing. And the thing didn't go well, right? There's all this drama that's a result of that. And it's not the son that God had promised to Isaac, or to Abraham. So they have to wait, right? God's timing is perfect. We need to be patient in that. James 1, if you're a high schooler, at Second Sunday this last week, we talked about James 1, right? Consider it pure joy when you face trials and temptations of many kinds. Those trials and temptations, the hard things that happen to us, are a part of God's timing. It's a part of God's plan within what he's doing. James 1 also says that every good and perfect gift comes from the Father who does not change like shifting shadows, right? So God's plan is perfect. His timing is perfect. His gifts that he's going to give us, the trials that we have to go through, it's all part of this bigger picture plan. And God's timing in that is perfect. Romans 8 even says that God uses all things towards the good of those who love him. So if you're not happy with what God's doing right now, if you're not satisfied with that circumstance, or you're not satisfied with his response to your prayer, Just be still and know that he is God. Be still and wait. I'm sure Esther didn't love losing her parents. I'm sure she didn't love getting kicked out of her hometown. I'm sure she didn't love hiding the fact that she was going to be a Jew, or the fact that her cousin was going to get hanged, right? Those things were not fun in the moment, but God had a plan. There was something going on. It wasn't by chance that those things were happening. He was molding her, right, and using her to save his people. And so God's timing is perfect. We have to trust in that. And we also have to pause to thank God for the things that he's doing, right? As a result of this story, as a result of what happens with Esther and Mordecai, the Jews come up with this Feast of Purim. And in the Feast of Purim, they read the story of Esther and they celebrate all that God has done to save his people. Stop and celebrate what God is doing now, because his timing is perfect. And so celebrate the trials, celebrate the hard things now, because God's doing something with that later. Recognize that, because his timing is perfect. Let's pray. God, we're so grateful for an opportunity to read the story of Esther this morning and see how you worked in that scenario. God, to see how you saved your people and how you used Esther and Mordecai and even the king. God, we pray that we would trust that you have a plan, that things that happen to us are not just by chance. God, and that we would be able to celebrate those things and make it through those things because you are good and you are God. So guys, as we go to discuss these things, I pray that you would help us to focus on that and help us to trust you. We love you. Amen.
It's your word.
Okay, yeah, so I know, especially for me, just speaking on that, like, one, that's a crazy
Story. Just, it's so insane God's plan in that, and like it doesn't mention God's name very much in that. It kind of shows how God works behind the scenes, and it can feel like that in our own lives. Kind of frustrating when we don't see the end of it, but we rejoice when we do see the end and we see, wow, God is faithful. Yeah, so what we're going to do today is we're going to break up in groups of 6 to 7 and invite a youth worker into that. Feel free to use these rooms over here and room A in the lobby. But yeah, break.